Hello and welcome to this Charleston 2021 session on how new open access management infrastructure is unburdening the researchers and focusing that on a national collaboration in Luxembourg. My name is Martin Jagerhorn and I'm head of business development at ChronosHub, and I have Tom Jacobs with me here today from the Luxembourg National Research Fund. So we'll take you through our collaboration, give you an overview and highlight a number of lessons learned from this collaboration so far. But first of all, just quickly for you that may not be so familiar with ChronosHub, it is the name of both the company based in Copenhagen, Denmark, and the platform, which is an open access management platform used for APC management and managing also open access agreements. And we work a lot with 3 different stakeholder groups: funders, institutions, including library consortia, and also directly with a lot of publishers. And independently of the perspective of these different stakeholder groups, we all share a lot of common challenges. And this is also the case for Luxembourg, and Tom will explain that in more detail soon. So from our point of view, we have a lot of stakeholders with systems, but still acting quite a lot in silos. And this leads to a lot of manual and duplicated work for everyone involved, with fragmented data and hence no reliable analytics. It's time consuming and high costs for all parties. And of course, we then also have the non-compliance risks. So the question is, how can we navigate these complexities? And based on these different collaborations and lessons learned, in particular also with Luxembourg, we have identified a number of best practices. Institutions that are really successful, they do have a developed open access strategy, first of all. And they tend to, in that strategy, to put the author experience first, really trying to unburden the authors in all kinds of ways along the different open access management processes. But they're also quite bold. They need to be at the forefront of open access and proactively drive change. And a key component of these open access strategies is also to centralize the open access funds. By having a central fund, well, you can get data under control, even if you're a very broad university and decentralized, you can still centralize the open access funds. So this is a key component in the best practice examples we've encountered. Collaboration is always key. That goes both for collaboration internally between the library and the research office in particular, because they both deal with quite important aspects when we talk about open access management, but of course also with third parties. So in the Luxembourg collaboration, we collaborate around the OS Switch, and we've also integrated the journal checker tool and a lot of other sources. And we work quite hard on trying to standardize and facilitate for everyone to have an exchange of data. So the standardization concerns different standards into the data formats, but also seen to the processes between now the funder and the institutions in Luxembourg, and a lot about the terminology. So we all understand the same things when we talk about hybrid and gold and green and so forth. At the same time as we try to balance that with the requirement or the need for flexibility, because clearly there is not one model that fits all. All of these are prerequisites for automation. So integrating with different systems like submission systems is important, but we still need also, of course, to make use of persistent identifiers so we can automate the handling of the data without the need for manual validation. So with that said, I'll hand over to Tom to give you a little bit more insights into the Luxembourg collaboration.
So thank you again for the opportunity to speak today. My main responsibilities are in the area of digital transformation, where I manage the deployment and implementation of new and innovative platforms and services. And I also represent my organization in the areas of data management and open science. I will give today a brief introduction into open access and open science in Luxembourg and the journey that we are currently on. As part of our various missions and funding instruments, we are also actively supporting and funding open access to publications. For this, I have to make a short dive into the past. So up until 2016, we have provided funding for publications via grant project budgets with no dedicated policy on open access. In 2017, we introduced an open access policy, which required our grantees to publish with CC BY licensing, having to acknowledge FNR, and having to respect embargo periods of up to 6 months maximum. To cover APCs, we introduced a dedicated open access funding instrument. And now, since this year, since January, we have a policy that is compliant with Plan S, and we integrated our open access fund into ChronosHub. Before I tell you more on that, let me tell you about the challenges of our previous open access funding model. So the program framework of that program was to set up an annual call for applications that allowed the reimbursement of APCs that occurred during the previous year. That had several drawbacks, as it was painful for institutions to collect all the data on publications, and for us as FNR to review each and every publication for its eligibility. So there was often a high amount of ineligible requests, as grantees often either forget to acknowledge FNR, do a wrong acknowledgement, apply a wrong license because they just don't know better, or simply don't pay attention to embargoes and other requirements that we gave them. Lastly, also, the fund had a very bad scalability because the administrative work increased tremendously with an ever-growing number of applications and publications that passed through it. So where do we stand today? Today, we enable direct open access through ChronosHub. So our grantees can access via ChronosHub a journal finder that directly allows them to check policy compliance and also confirms the amount that we can fund. Providing all the checks from the very start, the risk for human error has diminished tremendously. So the grantee has a security of funding and can, if wish, in many cases directly submit his manuscript via ChronosHub or register it simply after the submission. We as FNR, we can directly validate eligibility and, if a compliance error may occur, still request a modification. Lastly, we can directly fund the APCs as they occur. But our work on open access and open science is not limited to this alone. By continuing to highlight over and over again the importance, most of all, the benefits of open access and open science.
Thank you very much, Tom. To summarize what Tom just said, we have illustrated the situation in Luxembourg here, where we try to facilitate the collaboration between these four stakeholder groups. It starts by providing authors with guidance through the submission process, so they can see which journals that offer compliant routes into FNR's policy, but also who will pay and how much for any APCs, based on, for example, the institution's agreements with the publishers. The authors can also make seamless manuscript submissions to the publishers, as those systems are integrated, and we can automate the data collection of both article metadata and the invoices. And that also means that we can automate the rest of the processes, including approvals for payment and also compliance checks. And we make use of different kinds of deposit accounts to pay the publishers directly and avoid that authors have to re-enter any data several times in different systems. As the data is structured with global unique identifiers, we can also automate reporting back to FNR and institutions for monitoring the open access agreements that are in place, but also to automate repository deposits. So with that said, thank you very much for joining, and we're looking forward to the Q&A session later.